Good evening. This is a sit and talk. And one of the reasons is because I've gotten back too late from appearing on Ari's show, and so there's no daylight. Also, we still have our clouds, but nothing like New York, which has been compared by one friend to the scene in Batman in Gotham when the place is filled with this fog. So we're far enough away from that, although they say the alerts go all the way down to South Carolina. I spoke this evening about the status of the special investigation being conducted by Jack Smith. It does appear, as much as we've been led to believe something would happen before, this does look like the genuine article. We can only hope that it is. And the thrust of it is to look at Trump's misconduct and label him guilty of espionage. Now, there are variations of espionage. This particular charge is that a document or documents that he had, and they don't have to be classified, were used in such a way as to compromise our national defense. This is a 10-year charge. It's a very serious charge. I think there are other charges that could be brought in conjunction with it. It remains to be seen what the indictment will say. And you may say to me, so why is this charge different than other strongly proven charges that we've discussed publicly before? One of the differences is that the prosecutors have sent a note to the defense team of Mr. Trump, and it says that he is a target. Now, there are three terms in prosecutorial usage that are relevant when an investigation is underway. One, you can be a target. That is a statement by the prosecution that we have sufficient evidence to indict you. There is also the subject of subject. You could be a subject of an investigation, which means we don't yet have sufficient evidence to indict you, but you are being looked at to see what misconduct you have. And a third category is a witness, and that may mean we don't suspect you of anything and you're just here to identify telephone records or something like that. Now, how do we get to a point where we can prosecute Trump when so many have stayed back in the shadows and not done anything? It appears that his chief of staff has come forward. Well, I don't know if come forward is the right word, but been convinced, shall we say, to cooperate. And we're talking about Meadows, Mark Meadows, who is his chief of staff, who is at a number of the most important meetings, including that meeting down in Georgia in which Trump is asking, oh, why don't you just give me those votes and one more so that I win the election over Biden instead of losing it by that same spread. Meadows was also present at a meeting in which they were trying to get the Justice Department to write a note to Georgia to tell them to announce the fraud and to investigate the election. And when Trump was told in the presence of Meadows and others that that wasn't going to hunt and that people would protest it in the Justice Department, they dropped that idea. There was also phony electors, and there was the theory that they could ask the Congress to investigate it rather than confirm the election of Biden. And that was wrong on two prongs. One is that there wasn't the fraud, which would be the predicate for such a motion, and they had the law wrong. So you have a number of these things. And you may remember that Meadows was identified as one of the people in a referral to the Justice Department that he should be indicted. You may also remember that Meadows was held in contempt by the Congress, but that case wasn't prosecuted. Some of us thought perhaps there was a deal being made already then to have him cooperate and to try to minimize what he pleaded guilty to, if he pleaded guilty to anything or was convicted of anything. We'll find that in the months ahead, and it's irrelevant to what's happening right now. We have people appearing in the grand juries, both in Florida and in D.C. Some have asked, where is this going to be tried, and what are they doing with two different grand juries? The answer to that is it could be as simple as logistics, but in terms of the prosecution, the venue of a prosecution is where the criminal act occurred. But if it's a conspiracy, it could be lots of different places, and it's almost like electricity between them. So we can't be sure that the acts that are unlawful are connected so obviously to the location. But a lot of work has been done in Florida in terms of the search warrant and the subpoena and those things, and I suspect that that team has got first dibs, maybe necessarily as a matter of fact and law, not just experience, that the indictment will be there. Now, that's not to say there wouldn't be one in D.C. involving perhaps perjury, obstruction, a whole number of other things. This takes me to the second prong. The second prong of the prosecution of Trump is that Trump obstructed justice. And we've all seen this play out in public. We've heard Trump, not provide the documents he had, like, say, Vice President Pence did. We had him say that he had provided all the documents. Then they subpoenaed the documents, and they said, well, there are a few more, and that's it. And then they got a search warrant because they suspected that wasn't true, and they found another 100 documents. We have been advised since that the documents that he had that were classified, some are missing, we don't know where they are. And then one in particular at a meeting in New Jersey, we don't know all the details, seemed to be categorized safely as a document about a possible war or war plan against Iran. That plainly involves the national defense, and that's the espionage charge. So we have two kinds of charges possibly against Trump. One is this espionage charge, and the other is the question of obstruction of justice and the various ways that Trump did that. In that investigation, his counsel, Mr. Corcoran, may play an important role because he had a cover your ass memo, which basically laid out all his conversations with Trump, and many of what Trump proposed was untrue, apparently, and a judge in Washington, D.C., who reviewed Mr. Corcoran's notes, Trump's lawyer, said that he had to testify and that these things were made available to the prosecution. Now, we could go through all the various pieces of evidence, and I've gone through a fair summary, I think, so that you can get some idea of how this may be different than other hints at prosecution. The letter is real, and that's why his lawyers, Trump's lawyers, came to D.C. to meet with them for 2 hours plus to convince them not to go forward. They were not convinced. Such a meeting is customarily given. Sometimes it suggests other leads that a prosecutor follows up to tighten a case before they go forward. Sometimes they find something that discourages them from going forward. So the meeting, although it may have been a way to get public attention for Trump, had a very serious matter involved that was not frivolous, which was to try to convince with the three lawyers, the three armed individuals armed with facts and theories about why Trump shouldn't be prosecuted, including accusing Smith and his team of prosecutorial misconduct. Now, that's a charge, if they have any evidence of it, they can make once the indictment is charged, is filed and served. So they don't lose that, and that charge appears to be related to whether or not Corcoran could talk about the things that he did. And the judge already considered it, so I don't think that's going anywhere. In other words, this is a nightmare for Trump, and he's already had an ad published which is attacking Smith, and it's a pretty weak tea, in my opinion. There's talk about other people who may or may not cooperate. We found out that Steve Bannon was subpoenaed to testify. Some say why. There are a variety of reasons why you might do that. In his case, he was such a mastermind in his own mind that he was. And he has lots to tell us. And he had a station on the day of January the 6th, basically at that hotel, in which they were, reaching out through a variety of fellow travelers, if you will. The invitation to him, if one has been made, would expect him to plead guilty. He's stubborn. He might not do that. He might hope Trump will escape all of these things and pardon him if he gets reelected. I think this is troubling for Trump, and I'm glad to say that. And I'm hopeful that we'll see some evidence of it as soon as tomorrow, Thursday, although I would be surprised if, given the logistics of it, that we saw it sooner than a week or more. When I was a federal prosecutor, we came to a point where we invited people to cooperate or not. We told them the advantages that we could offer them by helping us early on were subject to a tight schedule, and they usually were, because at that point the case is crystallized and you feel a need to go forward. In Trump's case, since he's using espionage materials, if you will, it's important to go forward sooner rather than later, especially since Trump can't find the document that supposedly was the subject of the New Jersey meeting that involved what would be an approach against Iran. So that's important. And his lawyers can't find it either. So where do we go from here? Well, the people who decide to cooperate, we used to say, or I used to say, that there's a bus, and you're either on it or you're under it. Well, some are already under it because they probably haven't cooperated, but others have. You can often find from the indictment who's cooperating and who's not by the holes in the prosecution. Sometimes people who are cooperating are indicted. That's a little dangerous because if they confer to the other defendants, when they're cooperating, they're agents of the government. So prosecutors don't like to take that risk and rely upon the discipline of individuals who are cooperating, not to screw up and hear something and pass it on to the prosecutors that really is confidential, because often there are joint defense agreements in these cases. Is Trump going to be indicted with anyone else? I can't say, but the obstruction of justice charge suggests that he needed other people to help him. And if we're talking about Meadows cooperating, I would assume that he is going to agree to certain charges that relate to what he did in conjunction with Trump that is helpful to prosecute Trump. Is this significant? This is historic. As important as was the prosecution by D.A. Bragg, and it is important. This is sensational because consider the charge. The charge isn't about hush money in an election. It's an accusation that a former president of the United States retained documents and compromised the national defense by discussing them publicly. We don't know what else he may have done. So this is a very serious offense. Now, when I was a young prosecutor and I wanted to do official corruption cases, I was surprised that cases were made for $5,000 against officers, that is, congressmen and people who were in public agencies and so forth who misused their positions. Some of them I thought were disproportionate given the offenses that were involved. But this case is quite significant, and that will be said so. And in a way, it's ironic, if all this goes forward, that we have a man who has spread his professional career abroad, dealing with terrorism and misconduct by others elsewhere. And here he comes home and uses his skill to analyze what Trump did and failed to do and how he compromised the nation in violation of his oath. I would hope at some point someone would invoke Article 14, Section 3, that provides if you take an oath to uphold the government and then you try to tear it down, that prompts a bar against you holding any public office. I believe that charge is available to us with regard to Trump. But first things first, let's see that our government does indict Trump. Let's see that this one goes forward, this charge goes forward where others have not. We have seen the reaction of people who were resistant to a prosecution of Trump be enthusiastic. I mean this in a good way, enthusiastic that this was so severe that it had to go forward. I thought it would be interesting to review while it was fresh in my own mind, having done some of this analysis today before appearing on ARI, so that you can have a better understanding, if you have a chance to see this, of where we are, how this might be different, how I hope it is, but there's a part of me that is, well, comfortable with those who say, oh yeah, yippee-yi-yay, meaning, is this going to be another one of these things like happened in Florida in which we're promised something and nothing happens? That the imminence is absence. I don't think that's what we have here. And while my demeanor may not suggest it, I am quite excited as a guy who became a prosecutor to prosecute official corruption cases, that this one appears to be being brought home. So full ahead, steam, ramming speed, bring this son of a bitch down. So until I talk to you tomorrow, probably on a walk and talk, have a good evening, and I hope this was helpful. Bye-bye.